Hi, so today we want to talk about masters or not. As a psychology student, should you do a master or should you not do a master? And if you do a master, is this going to be a very expensive mistake? Masters range from 4 to roughly £25,000 in the UK, so you better make sure whether you should or should not do a master's. And this is what I'm going to talk about today here in this short video. My name is Andreas Kappes. I'm a senior lecturer at our wonderful City University here in London, and this is what we will be talking about in this brief video. So we want to try to say, okay, masters or not. First, I will suggest that most of you should not do a master. Okay, so the first part we will talk about when you should not do a master's. Then we will talk about when you should do a master's. For some of you, doing a master's is actually a pretty good idea, and you should do one. And at the end, I will talk about the worst reason to do a master's. Okay, so let's get into it. So most of the students that study psychology have an interest in mental health, and they want to become clinical psychologists, counseling psychologists, educational psychologists, or jobs that are associated with clinical counseling and educational psychology, such as a well-being practitioner or a high or low intensity therapist. And for all of these, my strong recommendation is to not do a master. If you are interested in mental health, you should not do a master. Why should you not do a master? Well, you should not do a master, first, because you don't need to do a master. And this was my next slide. You can show us here, right? For instance, if you want to become a clinical psychologist, you need to do a BPS accredited psychology degree, your bachelor, and then you need at least a year-long working experience. So you work, you earn money, you get experience, and then you do your doctorate, kind of like a 3-year vocational program that helps you to get the qualification that is also paid to become a clinical psychologist. This is also true for educational psychology. This is also true for counseling psychology. So what you can see here, what is missing, you don't need to have a master's. So if you want to become a clinical counselor or educational psychologist, you should not do a master's. There's no reason to do so unless you love education or unless you want to get rid of a good chunk of money. So what do I get as response often from students who ask me that, who push it back to me? Some just like, oh, but my parents want me to do that. There was the last student I talked to. She's like, oh, my parents really want me to do a master's. I think another very common objection is, but it will help me to become a clinical psychologist, educational counseling faster. I think this is not true. It actually might slow you down, because when you have finished your master, you still need to get that working experience. Okay, some masters promise you, oh, you can do the masters here and you can also get the working experience. We help you find these working experience, but these will be unpaid and this will be much less. So often you have to do the master and then get the working experience. Okay, so doing a master, if you want to become a clinical counseling or educational psychologist, is not the right thing. It will slow you down. Okay. Money, obviously, if you become a clinical psychologist, or any graduate level job and you have a master, you have to pay your master money back, right? And that's a substantial amount of money. Also, you have during your master to pay for your expenses, living costs. You probably want to eat in that year as well and do some fun things. So there's a lot of costs. And so it's not good to just sink that money for something that you don't really need, okay? I also think that this really contributes to boredom in your clinical, if you, for instance, do your doctorate. The doctorate is basically the educational or academic portion of that is a long stretched master, okay? So you have 1 or 2 days, most often 1 day that you come back to the university and you get taught on things. So you might have then already done that, but I don't think that is very helpful. I think that the doctorate, to pass the academic portion, it's not that hard. And if you got into it, you're more than capable of doing it. So I think if you do a master, it will slow you down. You will lose a lot of money. You will lose a year, and you might risk that you will be bored during the doctorate. So if you're only interested in anything with mental health, then you should not do a master. There's one exception, and that is, there's one exception. We come to this in a second, but you will say like, okay, Andreas, you told me I should not do a master. What should I do instead? Well, you should get work experience. For the work experience, you can become an assistant psychologist. You can become a well-being practitioner. You can become you become a cognitive therapist, which is like a high-intensity therapist. And now I have to move myself again. You can become a mental health care worker or support worker. Even if you just volunteer for a short time, this will be often in the NHS or in charities where you have active contact with patients. This will be much better than doing a master's out of the reasons before. And so do these things instead. Earn money right from after you do your bachelor. You graduate after your bachelor. You start earning money. You get that work experience. You might even find that these jobs are great and you don't want to actually become then a clinical psychologist. But this is what I recommend you should do after you finish your bachelor. Okay, there's one exemption, and I want to talk. I have not talked about this. I talked about this next. Sorry. And this is when should you do your master? And there's one exemption where you actually should do your master when you're interested in mental health. So, what are the reasons that you should do a master's? Okay. So the first one is if you want to become a forensic psychologist. Not a lot of students want to become a forensic psychologist. Often students are kind of discouraged when they see what you have to do because you need to have work experience. You have to work or volunteer in the prison system in order to become a forensic psychologist. That's the most relevant work experience. You have to do a master and you have to do the doctorate and you have to pay for all these things. I think if you're into forensic psychology, then don't get discouraged. At the end of that, you will have great earning potential and you have an exciting and interesting job. But if you want to become a forensic psychologist, which is basically something that has to do with mental health in the prison system, so it is mental health, then you should do a master's. Okay? The one exception. But make sure that before you start the master's, you were at least once in a prison and you liked it, because you might do the master and then realize, actually, I don't want to spend a substantial amount of time in prison talking to prisoners. So make sure that you get that work experience first, get that experience, and then you're sure you want to become a forensic psychologist. The other reasons why you should do a master's, next to if you want to become a forensic psychologist, is if you do want to do something that I often describe as something in the area of flourishing. Okay, so you want to become an organizational or occupational psychologist, a health psychologist, you want to do marketing, you want to do research, you want to become somebody like me, a lecturer who does research, you want to do something with behavior economics, you want to do market research, any of these areas that help people and companies to excel, that are not related to mental health, all of these require for you to do a master. So this is a substantial a smaller amount of our students, or a smaller number of students who want to do that, but that's another reason. Okay, so for instance, if you want to become an occupational organizational psychologist, you have to do a master. I would recommend that you just finish your degree, then do your master's, start working, and then this will qualify you to become an occupational psychologist. Other reasons I hear. Sometimes people say, yes, I know I shouldn't do a master's because in clinical psychology, but I have such bad bachelor marks. So you might not have hit the kind of 2-1 or higher, 2-1 or first. And now I feel like, now I can't become a clinical psychologist. I think the feedback on this is quite mixed. Some people say that applications for clinical psychology will only look at people who get a 2-1 or higher. Some of it is like, if you can make an exceptional case, and maybe the masters might help you with that. But I think the biggest problem is if you get a 2-2 or lower in your bachelor, you first have to make sure that whatever caused that, you fixed. Okay, so it seems like that's something with your organization, your motivational structure that led to have these poor marks needs to be fixed first. And just doing another master, the same thing, again and again will not fix that. So I would say like, well, at times there's a reason if your marks are really bad, maybe to work a little bit in the field, grow up a little bit, become organized, become disciplined, and then do a master's to demonstrate that you are now academically strong. That might be a reason, but I think be careful with that, okay? Some students say, okay, I need to get a visa. If I only volunteer, I have not gotten work experience during my degree. I have not volunteered during my degree, so I have real trouble now finding a graduate level job. So I need to first volunteer. For that, I need a visa. So I do my master's alongside that because that will allow me to get the visa, okay? Fair enough, makes sense to me. If that's your case, then you can consider as a backup plan in order to get that work experience to do a master. But again, that's a pretty expensive backup plan. And then we come to the absolute worst reason, okay? So why people sometimes say, okay, I want to do a master. And this is the last one, which adds to, okay, you shouldn't do a master. You should definitely not do a master. It's like, I don't know what I want to do, okay? So often students are like, oh, I really have no idea what I want to do. I don't really want to do anything with mental health. I'm not sure about organizational health, marketing. I'm not so sure. So what they do is like, oh, why don't I just stay another year in education, another year just like going to university. And I think this is the absolute worst reason, because you will do a master often that is so broad that doesn't qualify you in any direction. Okay, instead of doing an organizational psychology master, they might do something that's like a little bit of cognitive, a little bit of social, a little bit of neuroscience. So you kind of just add on 1 year of a master, a very unspecific master, because you think, oh, I don't want to close any doors, and you haven't closed any doors. But after the end of that year, you most likely will still not know what you are going to do. So you did a master that doesn't help you to get any step higher because it's so unspecific, it's so broad, and you still most likely won't know what you are going to do afterwards, because the universities are great at teaching you content, great at teaching you psychological theories, findings, methods, but we can't give you the experience of how it will feel like to work in a certain area. And you have to find that, you have to volunteer, you have to get work experience. And a master's will not give you that either. So be careful. I think for me, this is the absolute worst reason. I'm just like, I don't know what I should do. So why don't I give 15,000 to this university to kind of stay in that limbo another year? Rather, what you should do is you should go out and try certain things out, okay? Just volunteer, have internships, and see what you like and what you don't like. And then by the process of elimination, you will get to a much better and much cheaper solution than just out of not knowing doing a master's. Okay, if you have any questions about that, either email me or leave a comment and I will get to it, and hope to see you soon.